You guys got 2 lines here, right? Nacho, right? Nacho and Jason, you appeal. You appeal to me, and they'll either agree or disagree with my call. Okay? All right, Luis serving. Score is 0 serves 0.
And you know how much that means to a player, Dave. It's all about those stepping stones. Luis Cordova has that deadly right hand. He hasn't touched the ball yet with his left. And that's Dan Armijo's best shot, unfortunately for him. Complete hand air.
1 serving 0.
1 serve 0 is the score here early on. Again, if you just tuned in, it's 1 game to 25. Tiebreaker does not exist here. You have to win by 2, and there is a little element we call halftime.
There's no pro player, Dave, with the disparity in their strong and off hands as great as Luis Cordova's. As you'll see when he uses his left, Luis Cordova, Dave, would be a top 6 player if he improved his left hand to just mediocre.
0 serving 1.
We'll see if Danny goes after that left hand. You see Danny Armijo really crowding Luis there, forcing him to hit that ball into the right corner.
1 serving 1.
Now, you said earlier you thought that Dan Armijo looked really sharp here. I think what you were seeing was he was putting the ball in a spot where it was very difficult for his opponent to get it back like that.
Well, not only that, Dave, but he has a look of intensity in his eye here this week. He's not making his usual wisecracks in the court and banter. He's really here to play. And you know he's disappointed, Dave. He lost in the qualifier in Idaho to John Bike, lost in the first round at the US Open, so he hasn't picked up any points yet here in the race season. You know how much this means to him, Dave, to stay in that elite group of players.
This year, Danny Armijo celebrated his 30th year playing at the USHA Pro Nationals in the pro division. Not just the national, but in the pro division. He's turning 50.
Wow. Incredible. He truly has found the fountain of youth, Dave. He hasn't aged in about 15 years. He's still playing great handball. It was Dan Armijo taking out local resident and sparring partner of Dave Vincent, Steve Natale, easily 25-10 this morning. A little bit surprising to us, Dave, that no Steve Natale. Dan Armijo telling me that he didn't really feel comfortable in there. I thought he looked really good, though. Does not look sharp here thus far, though, against young Luis Cordova. Luis Cordova actually attending my academy last summer, Dave, before the Nationals. Said that it really didn't help his game at all. I didn't ask him for a testimonial for my upcoming
It's actually called the
brochure.
DFA, the DFA, the Dave Fink Academy.
It's true. Said that he didn't need much help on his sun tanning. My job was pretty incomplete after that.
You were taking tips from your own students.
4 serving 1.
4-1 is the score here early on. Most people in the stands feel that Luis Cordova will take down Dan Armijo, but you believe that anything could happen here.
I think this will be a very close match. Dan Armijo, Dave, has been very inconsistent, though. the last couple of years, I've seen him play extremely well. Actually played against him 12 months ago at the WPH Minnesota Pro Stop, where he was phenomenal. I've seen him in other events, Dave, where he just didn't look sharp. Dan Armijo spends most of his time now, Dave, in Rotan, which is, I believe, in Central America. Does not play any handball while he's down there, so he'll take 6 to 8 weeks off at a time, sometimes coming straight to a tournament from Rotan.
And that's where Dan is very sharp off the back wall. He takes a little off, goes over the top, keeps the ball down. 1-4, Dan Armijo serving. 1 game to 25. You have to win by 2. And at 15, there will be a halftime automatic 3-minute timeout.
Luis Cordova, Dave, is a tremendous get artist. It looks like he's really not moving that fast or trying that hard in there, but he just gets to everything. He's got quick feet and a really long reach.
This is where Dan has survived all these years. He is forcing the action in here right now, Dave, and he puts it away right there with that kill shot off the front wall. He forced Cordova left, right, front, and back multiple times during that rally.
That's the first point I've really seen Danny play here.
He was in complete control from the very beginning of that serve.
Well, he really had a strategy there at that point, including pounding that overhand shot down the left, which set up the back wall kill.
You can't appeal that. Second serve.
I believe Andy Shad caught a foot fault, and Dan appealed it. Andy's saying that he can't appeal a foot fault. That's actually not true. You can appeal a foot fault. That's a flat rollout there from Dan Armijo.
Now Dan's feeling it.
3 serving 4.
3 serves 4. You think a guy like Dan, who's been on the pro tour for 30 years or so, would know not to ask a question about appealing a foot fault.
Well, you actually can appeal a foot fault. He was correct.
Right. I mean, he would argue to the referee, I'm saying, and say, yes, you can, but he decided just to let that go. Almost as if he said, well, maybe there is some truth to that. I think I remember appealing once about 1978, but
Dan Armijo holds the distinction of winning the only match where his opponent finished with a negative score.
Can you explain?
Well, he actually beat me 11 to -1 in the finals of the first ever pro consolation, 1997.
And what was the reason for the negative? I mean, I think I already know, but...
And why ask?
Well, I haven't heard the story yet. I just have a feeling I know.
Well, I was up 20 to 9 in the second game after I won the first game. Managed to serve for the match 11 times, never scored a point, and then lost control of myself in the tiebreaker.
6 serving 3.
6 serves 3.
Ended up being outscored 23 to -1 to end the match. You don't hear about many 23 to -1 runs. But I was on the receiving end.
But what happened on the negative part? Let's watch this rally here.
Well, it was interesting, Dave, because Danny was screaming and swearing throughout the entire second game, and everyone was laughing. But when I started screaming and swearing in the tiebreaker, I just started getting technicals.
Okay.
That's how that worked. I'm not saying I wasn't screaming and swearing. I was.
Point.
And now there's a point again for Dan the Hand Armijo.
4 serving 6.
Danny Armijo, Dave, really serving well here today. He served 5 or 6 aces in that first round match against Steve Natale, and here he is continuing that trend. Great serves and a big setup. That's a nice left there from Luis Cordova.
It seems like Dan knows that that's a weakness of Cordova, and he keeps pushing that ball over there. Here's a setup.
Terrible shot there from Dan Armijo. Very easy rally ending opportunity.
Those fish shots are very, very sharp from Dan this tournament.
I called him clever. Luis Cordova will tire, Dave.
Looks like he's tiring right now.
I agree with you, but his conditioning is not great. He's tall and lean, but he doesn't really have the best diet, and I don't think he does too much cross-training either, Dave.
We're all together at 6 here on the scoreboard, powered by Zions. You're watching the Race for 8, sponsored by Simple Green. We're at the Tucson Racket and Fitness Club here in Tucson, Arizona. And we apologize about the scratch marks on the glass and the shadow. That's just part of it, the way it is that we have to go through here filming in Tucson, but we're going to take care of some of that a little later on.
I actually didn't even notice it.
Well, you're so used to it. That's a terrible shot from Armijo. Cordova makes him pay.
Well played rally there from Luis Cordova, flipping a 3-wall return with his left hand and setting up a right-handed overhand pass. I like Luis Cordova's game a lot, Dave. He's got an excellent mental game. He does not get down on himself. Look at Dan Armijo making some really nice gets.
Point.
That time Luis just floating that ball over Danny's head.
7 serving 6.
Look at that huge natural from Dan Armijo with the offhand, Dave. He snaps off a 1.5-foot natural hop, jumps away from Luis Cordova. Luis just flicking it back, and Danny taking care of the easy setup.
Dan back in the box now, representing both of these players, actually representing Salt Lake City Aces. 2 teammates going up against each other here. So you have at least one of the Salt Lake City members advancing, no matter what.
It'll be a Salt Lake Slam here in the first 2 matches. Guaranteed of the qualifier is
good point.
The Aces number 2 dog, the Assassin Ortiz, books his spot in the top 12, and now it'll be another ace also booking his spot. And look at that beautiful back wall kill there from Dan Armijo. Threads the needle. The ball checks up just before it bounces into the left side wall.
Now, we weren't going to talk about this much, but
beautiful shot there from Dan Armijo.
You and I both hate to overpromise and underdeliver, but we had a gentleman here that has connections with ESPN Deportes who came in to watch our production, is very impressed with what we are putting on for handball. And he also does play-by-play for the Houston Astros. But he took a lot of pictures and he's sending it back to Bristol. And he said that he felt that you, Dave, should apply for a job as a color commentator, and asked you all the other sports that you're proficient in. And how did that make you feel when this guy from ESPN just a few minutes ago talked about...
Is this like inside the actor's studio now? We're interviewing me?
Came out to check out the handball production.
I told him that as much as I dislike my broadcast partner and don't speak to him, I don't go anywhere without him.
So it's a package deal.
It's a package deal.
Okay.
8 serving 8.
Might mean there might be another sport I have to lose millions on in order to start loving it. Look at that shot right there from Dan Armijo, and now stays in that box.
8 serving 8.
Forcing that side out. 8-8 here. Armijo going with the left hand. Earlier we're sending in the court, and I was talking to one of the older players here in Tucson, and they said, what is Dan serving left-handed for? And that's just something he's done for many years, and I know that you've seen him do that back in the old days.
But that was taboo for many years, but Danny hits that left-handed Z-serve so well that how can you argue against it?
What it does is it puts the ball on the left side, so your opponent's using a weak hand and trying to be defensive with a weak hand.
I've actually done a lot of practicing, Dave, with just my right hand only. I find that I hit a better right-handed serve into the deep left corner than I do with my left, yet don't have the confidence to use that in a big tournament.
But Dan does, and the reason why is because he's been doing it for years.
And that's a terrible rally loss there for Dan Armijo, as he has such a simple shot and gives Luis Cordova an opportunity to stay in the rally, which he did, and ended up winning the rally. Dan Armijo completely in control right now. Dave leads 9-8, but he's completely dictating play. The match is being played on his terms.
Here's a setup, and he
Luis
gets it.
Cordova, much like Armando Ortiz, Dave, likes to play the fast-paced ground and pound style. Dan Armijo is keeping the ball up high, and when he is getting those setup opportunities, Dave, he's taking care of them. And that's a terrible left there from Luis Cordova. Fortunate that ball doesn't come off the back wall. And another poor left hand.
Dan Armijo is in his 30th year touring in the pro ranks.
Luis gets away with that shot there. He should have slid that ball down the right side wall, Dave, rather than hitting the reverse, bouncing into the side wall. But Dan Armijo unable to make the retrieve. I'm not sure about that call there. Andy Shad from the old school of refereeing, where he will call more hinders than you'll see the new school younger players call. You'll see the new school guys allowing the players to play through a lot more.
Danny's very relaxed out there, Dave, and he always shows it with being jovial. He just alluded to the fact that the ball broke.
You guys ready? All right. 2 serves, the score is 8, serving 9.
One of the bracket namesakes, Dave, the great Vince Sanangelo, checking out the action here on the big screen. It's actually larger than life here in our studio, Dave, as the action plays on the front wall here. Looks like it's about 12 feet high here.
9, serves 9.
Well, the Vince Sanangelo bracket will feature Jonathan Iglesias and Andy Nett facing each other at 5 o'clock Mountain Time today. Vince Sanangelo and the rest of the namesakes of each one of these brackets, the Doug Clark bracket, the Charlie Wicker bracket, the Vern Roberts bracket, are all local Tucson, Arizona master national champions, and in Vern's case, just one of the greatest players of all time. Now, it was a toss-up. We were thinking about Neil Manning, who also was a great player here and won a lot of national championships in the age divisions, but we settled with Vince Sanangelo.
You, Dave, also could have been named in that bracket, a Tucson resident with Masters national championships.
That out.
Actually, there were so many to choose from that we've actually done this before. And
you've had a lot less choices had you chose Masters that have not won a Masters national
That's
title.
true. Well, I was thinking, are we going to have the Max Gaither bracket and we had the Graybill bracket?
Great anticipation there from Luis Cordova. Dives in, but unable to keep the rally alive.
9, serving 11.
Score is 9-11. Our scoreboard will be corrected here shortly. Very strange serve there from Dan Armijo. Nearly hit himself with the serve.
Wow, strange return. It was actually right down the wall.
Luis Cordova has a lot of power with that right hand, Dave, and I don't think he's using it enough. Should be looking to overpower Danny Armijo in here. Look at that great get, and Danny thought about jumping up there, would have been unavoidable and completely out of position.
All right, that's your first timeout. Score is 11, serving 9. You got 1 minute.
It's a 1-minute timeout call here. 11-9 with Dan Armijo calling timeout, but look at Cordova here, bent over and really really trying to focus his energy right now during this timeout.
This is something different for the players, Dave, because they're playing to 25. So do you alter your timeout strategy a little bit? Do you wait a little bit longer to call your first timeout because you are going all the way to 25? Now, remember, you do have that 3-minute halftime in between. Do you want to use up 1 or 2 of your timeouts before the halftime, or maybe save all 3 for after the halftime?
Well, that's the interesting thing. Since this is so new and players have not tried this before, they're having to try to develop their strategy as they go on.
This is where being a part of a team, Dave, really helps, because a lot of these teams actually talk to one another daily, talking about various strategies. I know this is something, Dave, that we'll be talking about in our Seattle WAC secret text meetings and also phone call meetings. We also do Skype, but, you know, what's the best strategy as far as your timeouts during these 25-point matches? Sean Lenning believes that you just call the timeouts when you feel like you need to change the momentum, and John Bike says he calls them when he can't breathe. I actually never call them. Big reason I never win.
Well, I kind of like the John Bike theory. If you don't feel like you can go on because of your stamina, it's smart to take the timeout. But I also like to just take a timeout to break the momentum. But as I'm finding that as you get older, and I know you're finding that's a beautiful shot right there, but as you're finding out too, Dave, you can break momentum by talking to your opponent just as easy as you can by calling a timeout. And I'm not talking about being rude or crude, but you can sometimes say that.
But that works too.
That has also been successful. We could overthink this thought, but I mean,
I'm not sure we can.
It certainly
is part of that psychology of the game.
I'm 40 now, and I'm finding out that you can actually go up to somebody and just say to them, I'm breaking your momentum. And then
that's called the transparent approach.
Maybe we have to write down all the different approaches there are to it.
People respect transparency.
12 serves 10.
That's a nice shot from Luis Cordova. I agree with the referee's call there. The closer the game comes to conclusion, the more arguing you'll hear from Dan Armijo, the more balls he could have had. I like that serve from Luis Cordova, but I'd like to see him change the pace of that serve a little bit, Dave. Go to the hard overhand two-wall serve, but also mix in a softer overhand. And now it's Luis Cordova completely controlling the action here as he's got Dan Armijo behind him, driving him from side to side. That was what Danny Armijo was doing earlier in this game, Dave, as he built a nice 2-point lead. And that's the problem with overhitting that two-wall overhand serve, Dave, is it pops around the back wall, left side wall for a kill shot opportunity. And for a guy with as great a back wall game as Dan Armijo, Dave, he'll convert most of those. Beautiful kill shot there from Luis Cordova.
Cordova looks pretty comfortable right now, Dave.
Well, incredibly, Dave, just about 5 minutes ago, it was Dan Armijo looking incredibly comfortable and Luis Cordova looking gassed and out of sorts. Now a complete reversal. Nice kill shot there from Danny Armijo. That's the kind of ride that will take its toll on Dan Armijo, Dave. He had to cover about 70 feet of territory there, including a sprint from the foot fault line to the back wall.
Score here is 10-14. If Cordova scores one more, there will be an automatic 3-minute timeout. We call it halftime, and that's designed to break momentum. And that could be a good thing or a bad thing for you, depending on what's going on.
Well, just like in football, Dave, if you're down by a touchdown with about 2 minutes before halftime, you want to at least get yourself on the board, cut into that lead. If Dan Armijo can cut this lead to 2 or even 1 before halftime, he'll feel a lot better about himself coming out after the break. And that's a beautiful shot from Luis Cordova. And conversely, Dave, should Luis Cordova go into halftime with that 4-point lead, he'll be feeling really good.
Well, he could do it right here. That was a good serve. Here's a huge setup for Luis Cordova. Goes down to the corner, and Dan Armijo's unable to get it.
All right, that's your first, that's the 15-minute timeout.
There you go. See, Dan knew what was going on.
Timeout. You guys have 3 minutes.
15 to 11. Danny Cordova making it to that automatic halftime that we have built into this qualifier here. Dan Armijo walking down the hallway. To his left is our broadcast booth.
You could really say that this halftime day benefits both players, as Luis Cordova goes into the halftime with a lot of confidence, and Dan Armijo goes into the halftime just at about the right time for him, as he's now fading a little bit. Looks like he's a little bit tired, lost a little bit of the momentum and the strategy that he was using so effectively there in the middle of that first game to 25 here.
Yeah, now, if he would have scored a couple more points, let's say he would have gone up and tied at 14, and then the halftime was called, that's where it could be a little frustrating for you, because you can see that I've now generated some momentum, and especially if he would have controlled the action on the court like he was doing earlier, running his opponent around in circles. It could have been at that time where you want to kind of put your opponent away after you see that they're a little bit tired, and all of a sudden halftime comes.
Now, I'm just thinking here on the fly, Dave, because this is the first time we've instituted the halftime rule here, but what if the person that wins the coin toss, Dave, serves first, but after halftime, the person that lost the coin toss comes in serving, regardless of whether it's their serve or not?
That's interesting.
That's only fair. In football, Dave, if you win the toss and you kick off in the first half, you get to receive in the second half. Now, why shouldn't Dan Armijo come in here after receiving serve to start this match, now start with the serve despite losing the last rally?
I'd like the idea. I mean, let's talk to the rules committee. Wait, hold on.
We're all here.
Oh, okay, it's an agreement.
Okay.
No, it's certainly a good idea, and of course we can talk about that. And that's what's great thing about the tournament. Somebody said earlier, and I know this is going to sound really bad because we're on TV, but they said, you know, I don't like the 25-point game. And I said, well, let me show you. And I pulled out the checkbook, and I say, this is a $40,000 tournament, and we're writing the check, so we do whatever we want. So in a strange way, we can just go ahead and institute that.
That's a good way to build relationships. People really.
Yeah, I was unfriended on Facebook within 30 minutes of that comment, by the way. As we get ready here for the conclusion of what you call the second half of this this Charlie Wicker qualifier bracket between Danny Cordova and Dan Armijo, or Luis Cordova and Dan Armijo. Here's something I want to bring up, though, Dave, that I think is interesting. The referee is calling this halftime, as we call it, but they're not making the players change their clothing, their shirts or their gloves. And we saw earlier in that other game where Andy Shad had that timeout, the halftime. He came back in, and within 1 point, they made him go out and change his shirt and his gloves. Luis Cordova's out here with his original gloves on and his original shirt on.
Well, in Luis Cordova's defense, he really doesn't sweat much. I've never seen him need to change his gloves. I think he only brings one pair of gloves to a tournament, and I usually see him wearing the same shirt throughout the whole tournament, too. He just doesn't sweat a lot, so I'm not sure it's really necessary.
Well, I think it probably is necessary to just say it's a mandatory, you change your gloves, change your shirt here. I don't think you should walk around at halftime. I don't see the players walking around at halftime without.
You don't think the players wear the same uniform in the second half as they do in the first half?
I do, but I believe that they do tidy up just a little bit.
How do you tidy up? You either change your clothes or you don't. I mean,
have a time for a towel timeout to wipe the sweat off their face.
Dan Armijo will be frustrated with himself here because he should have won this rally already. And instead it's and fortunately for Luis Cordova here, Dave, we do have a veteran referee that knows how to handle the hand.
Well, I think the hand's right there. He swung and hit Luis Cordova on his follow through. There was a little bit of congestion there, and you saw him throw his hands up. That's what you're trained to do. Referee said he didn't see it, so you're saying that the ref doesn't believe him that there was contact, because it says clearly in the rule book that if you hit somebody in your follow through, it's an avoidable hinder.
I was more concerned with the actual training. Where does this training take place? Where are you trained to put your hands up? Is that a school that you go to, or Who trained you to do
Dan
that?
Armijo's been training on the Pro Tour for 30 years, and everyone keeps telling him to raise your hands if there's a bad bounce or a bad call or a hinder or whatever the case is. And we both saw him raise his hands because he hit Luis with his follow-through.
I've never had a referee tell me to raise my hands for anything. So, yeah, I'm not disputing what you're saying. I haven't had those referees that Danny has had. And apparently that you've had also. I know that you raise your hands at the buffet when you need another plate. That's actually your workout.
It's not my fault I'm always hungry.
And Luis is staying there as though he will get this call. I don't really understand what he's asking for. He took the shot. He had a pretty easy shot there. He's trying to appeal a hinder call. And now Danny being very nice and calmly telling him that, no, you can't appeal the hinder call. I agree with our referee, as I have with every call thus far in both matches. Surprisingly, Dave, we have our strengths and weaknesses sheet that we go down in every match. And I had Dan Armijo's left hand being a strength over Luis Cordova's left hand, but they've been about equal here, and it's been Luis Cordova's right hand that's been stronger, and that's why he's got this 15-12 lead.
15 serving 12.
Neither player has been able to end rallies with their left hand. And really, the left hands have just canceled themselves out. And that's a beautiful back wall kill there from Dan Armijo. And no, you're not listening to WPH Deportes. That's just some of the banter up there in the gallery.
As long as they keep it clean, I think everything will be okay.
Well, this is the internet, so it doesn't necessarily have to be clean, although they could be subject to fines. A lot of people curious, Dave, as to where those fines actually go.
And it goes to us. Let me just tell you right now. That
actually goes straight into the announcer vacation fund. If 3 more players, Dave, don't wear their WPH shirts, we will be on an all-expense-paid trip to Maui next weekend.
What a rally. Side out. Nice hustle, guys. Good shot. 15 serving 12.
Dan Armijo losing a lot of the rallies, Dave, that I believe he should have won.
I agree with you on that. I think that he could easily have 5 extra points, but you know, you could also say that Luis Cordova could have some more points too. Let's listen to this banter here.
Luis, I can call it hinder on that. That's not an avoidable hinder. I can call it hinder, but that takes away your offensive opportunity. Listen, you guys are up front and you guys bumped. That's not an avoidable hinder. Luis, I can call a closer game, but I don't want to take away your offensive shots. That was an offensive shot. Side out.
I see what Luis is saying here, but I hope, Dave, that we can use Andy Shad's explanation there during our referees meeting tonight, because he has the perfect poise, the perfect tone, and the composure. And you see how he just deflates the situation. Other referees, Dave, might become aggressive there and argumentative and just escalate the situation, but Andy Shad, Dave, knows what it's like to be in there and just how emotional it can become. And as a referee, he's the calming influence. He stands by his call and explains it, and then has the players
15 serving 12.
reset and play. Great get there from Dan Armijo. And there's another opportunity for Luis Cordova to end the rally with his left hand, but unable to do so.
Great hustle, Danny.
Frustrating there for Danny as he really extends himself trying to win that rally, but Luis Cordova winning that rally. We'll see if Danny can recover from that. That's a very tiring rally to lose.
That's a point.
That's a shot I don't see either of these guys hitting enough, Dave, is the return of serve, first strike, fly, kill. A lot of people, Dave, asking me, what is first strike? It sounds, you know, really cool, but in reality, it's the best strategy in handball, Dave. You serve a good serve, you get a weak return, and then the next shot is your first strike, and you're trying to put that next shot away. So it's your first strike. It's first strike handball.
I remember talking to you about that a couple years ago when I called it serve and shoot, and you laughed at me.
Well, I didn't
now you're calling it serve and strike, and it's the same philosophy, and all of a sudden it seems like you're a genius.
It's actually first strike, and it's all about semantics.
I wish it wasn't.
17, serving 12.
I've been waiting for this opportunity for 2 years.
Point.
Luis Cordova completely in control here. Remember, it was Luis Cordova winning the lucky loser drop down here in
Point.
here at the HBC2 in late March. Actually defeated Joe McCann and then John Bike after losing to Armando Ortiz in the final qualifier match.
I'm trying to let you guys play. When you get offensive chances, you don't.
Now you hear some arguing going on here a little bit.
Surprised, Dave, that Luis Cordova completely dominating here, yet still bantering with the referee. That can actually help some guys, Dave.
Well, I believe what Luis is saying is that he feels it's a trend. He feels that Dan Armijo does that specific play all the time to try to take away his shot. And Luis is taking it personal here because I think they've played enough to know that Armijo kind of hits his shot and then follows it in kind of slowly, like saying that's part of my follow through. And Cordova says he knows it's going to be a setup for me, and he's still following through. And yeah, it's my offensive shot, but he needs to stop and give me the shot.
I actually agree with Luis Cordova here. Danny Armijo is pushing the limits right now of fair play, but that's what the referee has to decide. Dan Armijo, Dave, does not have the type of game that can go on a 6 or 7 point scoring run. He doesn't have that kind of offensive explosiveness. So I believe this 6-point lead will be insurmountable.
19, serving 12.
Make that a 7-point lead. That's a beautiful shot from Dan Armijo as he finds the bottom board with his left hand from about 32 feet. Terrible serve from Dan Armijo and a great return from Luis Cordova.
19, serving 12.
These are one-game matches to 25. You have to win by 2. 19-12 with Cordova in the lead. And this is going to be a good thing for Team Salt Lake City Aces, as they're going to get the first 2 qualifiers representing their team into the bracket, which is certainly helpful. And as we look down onto that qualifier bracket, we have John Bike, who is on Team Seattle WAC, and I believe Abraham Montijo is not on a team, right?
He's not, no.
And then Andy Nett representing
the Idaho Spuds.
He will be going up against John Iglesias, who represents Team Tucson Gunslingers. So we have an unnamed finalist with Abraham Montijo coming up. And let's say he were able to defeat John Bike today. He would then have a draft to go in. Does anybody know?
That would actually be a supplemental draft, in our commissioner of the team standings would determine who drafts first. They would have an opportunity to draft Abe Montijo, which I'm sure they would.
But isn't that the last place team gets the first pick?
Well, that would stand to reason. I'm not sure what the exact rules are on that. I'm just a participant in the team race and the team standings.
So the FRA algorithm, which is that scientific method, much like the BCS, and they told me never to bring up the FRA algorithm and BCS in the same term, or else I would get penalized $25 as per the code of conduct. But well, I did, because I know those
we're now
at
that
home,
much farther away from our Maui trip thanks to that.
That means we're going to have to hold off on the tip for the limo ride from the airport to the hotel. But the point is, they told me not to bring up those two in the same sentence. And the reason why I did do it is because I know people at home just don't understand what the FRA algorithm is.
Well, there it is again. So now the poor limo driver won't even get paid for his work. He's just trying to earn a living, and yet here we are shorting him on his tip that he's earned.
Well, I'm going to make sure not to bring it up again.
Okay.
But as the conclusion of this qualifier, there's a good chance that blank, 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 blank will come into effect, and therefore...
And is also similar to blank, blank, blank.
Correct, but I don't want to say that, as Abraham Montijo might be put onto one of these teams based on that blank, blank, blank that is similar to the other, the other blank, blank, blank.
Right.
We have a timeout here on the court. It's a one-game match to 25 with Dan Armijo only 5 points behind Luis Cordova. And this is an extended timeout here. Referee is Andy Shad.
All right, time is in. The score is 15, serving 19.
Only 4 points away, Dan Armijo at 15-19.
I was reading Dan Armijo his last rights here, Dave, but now he's within striking distance.
Dan Armijo is one of those players that said after the Idaho Pro Stop that he did not like this one-game format.
Well, he's never won a one-game match to 25. I take that back. He did beat Steve Natale earlier today, but he's never won a qualifier final to 25.
He said, I'm a grinder. I like to grind. And I want to grind my opponents down. And I said, you know, Dan, maybe you need to start grinding earlier with this one-game format as opposed to waiting for the tiebreaker.
Well, I can understand what he's saying there, but he has to convert that shot there, Dave. Very easy opportunity. Luis Cordova, Dave, comes from a great handball family. His brother also playing in the qualifier here. His brother, a rising star, though today was not his day, as Abe Montijo just dismantling Danny Cordova. But Luis Cordova, Dave, plays a lot of two-wall pelota and fronton handball in Mexico. Says it's very big there. Money games every day. All different courts and different balls. He plays that mostly, Dave, and plays, wow, four-wall just about once or twice a week. But he says that those other games really keep his competitive fire alive and also his intensity and his power. Luis not shooting the ball now, Dave. Has a lot of opportunities. You see him lifting the ball now rather than trying to put the ball down, and he goes low there and connects. Beautiful shot there for Luis Cordova in that right corner. This is anybody's ball game at this point, Dave, and I know I may sound like I'm hedging, and that's because I am.
Oh, look at that laser right there from Armijo, picked up from Cordova. Nice dive right there from Cordova. Has kept this rally alive.
And beautiful handball there from Dan Armijo. Hits 3 or 4 kill shots there. Finally wins the rally with a beautiful fly kill down the right wall.
Score here at 17-19. Dan Armijo's keeping this close. I bet he wishes halftime would take place about now. You have to remember, Dan Armijo is 50 years old, 30 years on the Pro Tour.
Rather than trying to re-kill those balls in the front court, Luis Cordova just scooping balls, Dave, and keeping the rally alive. I think he should be going for the re-kills there rather than lifting those balls, and we'll see if he makes that adjustment. And Dan Armijo, just terrible footwork there, completely misjudging that shot into the back left corner.
Cordova serving at 20-17. Get the win by 2, and this is the qualifying round of the Charlie Wicker bracket.
Dan Armijo had an easy fly kill opportunity there with Luis Cordova out of position, let the ball bounce and just totally missed playing it. It's Dan Armijo, Dave, just with a lapse in concentration here late in this match, and it could very well cost him as he rallied to a 17-19 deficit, and now he's quickly lost 3 points in a row, all on airs coming from his own hand.
22 serving 17.
Well, he was within, like you said, 2 points. Now he's down by 5.
Right out. You got 1. Yep.
These aren't like rollover minutes with AT&T, Dan Armijo. He said he's going to save his timeouts for tomorrow.
That was sending a little message to the youngster. But he plans on making a big comeback here.
See that ball fade back. Not as much as he wanted, but it did.
Nice pick up there from Luis.
That's a weakness right there from Cordova. And Dan Armijo capitalizes on it. Cordova could have gone around the revolving door. He takes it with his left really high and just shoots it, and it just doesn't do anything. It's right back off the back wall. Well, you can't do that. It's basically an avoidable hinder. He said he got it. The referee thought he said it was too bouncy. He said, good call. That's one reason why you don't yell, I got the ball, after every single time you hit it. That's a good lesson for those of you watching at home. Dan Cordova said, excuse me, Luis Cordova said, I got it.
Okay, wait, Danny, stop. I would have killed it if he didn't say something. It was a big setup.
It's an avoidable hit.
You're right, Dave. It doesn't matter if he appeals.
No, this is a terrible call right here from the referee.
I thought it was two bounces. Do you want to appeal that? He said 2 balls. Okay. Point. All right. That's a point.
I want to thank our broadcast partner going into the court and correcting the referee. You can't talk after your shot. It's an automatic avoidable hinder.
Also the head of referees here this week, Dave. Just trying to make sure that
we pulled your name out of the hat, so you got it this time. Tommy Little had the last one. Sorry for the confusion there, but we'll try to explain it here in a minute. This is at an intricate time, too. And I hope Luis Cordova earns a little lesson there. At that beautiful 1-inch, not even 1-inch high kill shot from Dan Armijo. But there's a lesson to be learned on that. You dive for a ball, you do not say that you got it. That's Firehouse rules. Don't play like that on the Pro Tour. You just, if you got it, you got it.
If you speak during the point, you've lost the point. That's an automatic avoidable, as you said, Dave, correctly.
Wow, almost got his second crack in a row.
Well, it's a big setup, though. And somehow that looks so good going in, Dave, and just barely misses.
Serving 20.
And you can feel now the tension in the air, Dave. And there's Luis scooping that ball. Never seen Dan Armijo hit a ball backhanded before, Dave.
Hitter ball. That's a hitter ball. 22, serving 20. Go, screen ball. That was a good serve. One screen, you have 2 serves, 1 screen.
Ball sound like it broke.
Better hope that ball's broken.
And Dan looks like he's trying to break the ball now.
Let me see the ball, Danny. Hold on, let me see the ball.
It sounds like it's broke. Dan played around with it, and you saw Cordova come over and say, hey, give up that ball there. He's starting to learn here at a young age that the player doesn't have the ability to go and fiddle with that ball and try to break it, right, Dave?
That's true. It's shocking that he didn't know the avoidable verbal rule, but yet knows that rule immediately.
It's a one-game match to 25. Winner has to win by 2 points, and this is the qualifying round of the Charlie Wicker bracket. You're watching the Race for 8, sponsored by Simple Green and the World Players of Handball, streaming live at racefor8.com. My name is Dave Vincent, alongside David Fink. You are watching the finals of this qualifying round right here between Luis Cordova, who is winning 22, to Dan Armijo in his 30th year on the Pro Tour, who has 20 points.
We're playing with the Echelon Blue Label ball here, Dave, and I believe Luis Cordova should come in with this new ball and drill a hard 2-wall serve deep into that back left corner. As you know, Dave, that ball is so fast in the first 2 or 3 rallies. Really could catch Danny off guard here. The extra zip, and that's exactly the serve that he hits, and he hits the ace. Dave, can he hear us in there?
There's a possibility.
Okay.
Yeah, actually. We're in the adjacent court, and it is echoing. But, you know, you have to remember, he went to the DFA last year, the Dave Fink Academy.
It's true. That was actually earlier this year.
All my years are kind of running together. Nice dig right there from Cordova. Excuse me, Armijo. There was contact.
I'm surprised we didn't see Danny arguing there, as he had a pretty good opportunity.
22, serving 20.
I believe it's 23-20, Dave.
I agree with you. I thought it's the same thing.
Unless that serve was long, which I don't think it was, I believe the score should now be 24-20.
23, serving 20.
You have no complaint, though. And it very well could have been long on that one that was a crack. And now we are at game point.
Well, you know, Dave, it is awkward for a referee to be scoring up to 25. There's no 25-point scoreboard there on that card. And you see Luis Cordova wisely going to that hard 2-wall serve with this new ball, and it's paid dividends. He's either served an ace or a huge setup off the return because of it.
There it is. Luis Cordova takes down Dan Armijo 25-20 to win and qualify for the second straight qualifying tournament. The first one being the first race stop in Idaho, and the second one here in Tucson, Arizona, and that does it for the tournament for Dan Armijo. Dave?
Well, it's actually his 3rd consecutive qualifying tournament success, as he qualified here at the HBC 2 in the same format. So Luis Cordova certainly proving, Dave, that he's one of the top 14, top 12, maybe even top 10 players, as his ranking will continue to improve. And let's not leave him out of that chase towards the Players' Championship race stop number 8 in Seattle, Washington, May 18th to the 20th. Luis Cordova looks really good, Dave. He's only lost to Armando Ortiz, Nadi Alvarado Jr., Andy Nett, and that's it in his last 3 WPH stops thus far. So he's certainly played extremely well, and he'll be looking forward to Dave to drawing any of those number 5 through 8 guys, and I'm sure, Dave, he'll feel very confident going into any of those matchups.
Well, I think he'd be confident pulling your name, if possible, tonight later on during the ceremony. So I'm certainly, I'm sure he's hopeful of that potential seed and draw. We are going to take a quick timeout. It was Danny Cordova taking down excuse me, Luis Cordova. Danny is his brother who lost to Abraham Montijo earlier. Abe is getting ready to play John Bike coming up right around the corner, and that's going to pack the house here in Tucson as we get ready for that Doug Clark bracket as part of the race for 8. These qualifiers will go into the top 12. Right now we have the Elite 8 that's waiting there. You're one of those Elite 8, and then they become the top 12. And that's a very special thing, and these qualifiers are very happy to have achieved that qualifying status. We're going to see if we have another one here. Huge matchup right now, right around the corner, as Abraham Montijo faces John Bike. We'll talk about that in about 5 minutes. We're going to take a timeout from the Tucson Racket and Fitness Club in Tucson, Arizona. This is the Simple Green Race for 8. Stick with us. We'll be back in just a bit.
Hello, I'm Bruce Fabrizio, inventor of Simple Green. Our non-toxic, biodegradable works great for cleaning it. Thank you. Non-toxic, biodegradable, Simple Green. It's great for cleaning.
Working and working out takes a lot of energy. That's why I drink Zenergy.